Hi, class. I got a question from one of your classmates about co-cultures, asking me to go into a bit more depth explaining what they are, especially explaining what is the difference between a co-culture and just culture, right? The word culture, as you've already studied and learned, hopefully this week, is a complicated one, right? It means a lot of things. Our culture is how we internally process what is happening in the world. It's how we understand. Really, everything is informed through culture. So that's a big topic. What we're talking about with co-cultures, we used to call them subcultures, and they are these smaller identity groups that exist within the dominant culture. So let's talk about America. America's dominant culture is really hard to nail down as far as other countries. It's usually easier, but America's melting pot attempt at being a melting pot, I believe, makes that difficult. But we can. It's easy to identify, I think, in America, subcultures or co-cultures, as they're called. There's a lot of them, and they could be ethnic. They could be, like a nationality. Maybe Canadians living here in America would probably still consider themselves Canadian. Maybe they still see that as part of their identity, so they would be part of the Canadian co-culture, even though they're in America. There's lots of them. I'm sure you've watched the other video where she explains the other professor explains what co-cultures are, and she gives some examples of her own co-cultures. I can give you some examples of mine. I have a lot. I think you do too. As a gay man, there's a whole bunch of things that I'm involved in with that. I used to play softball in a gay softball league, and that was huge. That was we practiced once a week. We had games once a week, twice a week. It was a big deal. So it was part of my identity. So I considered myself part of that co-culture. I don't play anymore because the pandemic kind of ended that. So it's no longer a co-culture that I'm part of. I still consider myself part of the gay co-culture, but again, that's only if I consider it part of my identity. So what I want you to tell us in your essay is to think of a co-culture that you are involved in. But the difference between this and just a culture is I do not want you to write about being an American, right? That's too broad, right? And that's not interesting enough. In America, being an American means so many different things that I think it's far more interesting to talk about our co-cultures. So those could be religion, if you're involved in a religious organization and it's part of your identity, could be hobbies if they're part of your identity, could be lots of things, but lots of things also aren't, right? Like, for example, let's think here. I like playing video games a lot on my Xbox, but do I consider myself part of the gamer culture, co-culture? That's tricky. That's a hard one for me to answer. In fact, I'd have to think quite a while because I only play games casually here and there and with friends, like when there's a social hangout. By myself, not very much. So am I a gamer? I don't think I would consider myself a gamer, but maybe I would. It depends on the day. So what about you, right? That's the question for you is what's a co-culture you really truly identify yourself as part of? I also love anime. That's a big part of my identity. I've always loved it. It's what originally got me into studying Japanese. And I ended up living in Japan for a while and teaching English over there. So all of that is something I can talk about. I could talk about being part of a co-culture of people who love Japan. I'm not sure what we call that, but something about that I could talk about. I could talk about the anime aspect in particular, because that is a big part of what brought me in, right? There's a lot that you probably do in your life. When you think of who you are, what is your identity? Think about those things, what words you would use to describe yourself, and look in there. You probably can find at least one or two co-cultures that you could write about. If you have any questions or you want help with this, just let me know and I can talk with you. Good luck.